Good morning. This is Wes Fryer. Today is September the 6th, 2024. It's Friday, and I want to talk about free speech absolutism in this Wisdom with Wes episode as I wear my Wake Forest shirt that my daughter gave me for my birthday because it's WF. People incidentally have asked, like when we moved to Oklahoma, what's your, who's your team? They think we all should, root for OU or OSU. Now we live in Charlotte, North Carolina. Who's your team? It's actually the Kansas State Wildcats and the Air Force Falcons and a little bit of Texas Tech, Red Raiders, because I do have 2 degrees from them. But this is my shirt for the Carolinas. Okay, I digress. There's some really interesting things happening right now with social media, specifically with Brazil. There's a judge in Brazil that has just blocked, Twitter in the entire nation. I would commend to you, and I'll put a link in the YouTube description, the Hard Fork podcast, which Casey Newton and Kevin Roos do. It's Kevin's with the New York Times. Casey has his own. It's called Platformer. It's his own social media platform as a journalist. And so it comes out on Fridays. And so I was listening to that this morning. I'll probably listen to the rest of it today. And so there is some confusion that we have throughout society about free speech. As a teacher and as someone who believes in civics education and would like to strengthen civics education, I think it's really important for us to understand what the amendments to the U.S. Constitution provide and who they limit. There are today people who put on a robe or a cape or lift up a banner of free speech absolutism. And I think, number one, it's important to recognize that here in the United States, the First Amendment does not guarantee us the right to say anything we want, anywhere we want, without consequence. The amendments to the Constitution limit government power to restrict. Of course, those are not present around the world, and different countries have different rules. We do not want, as rational and moral beings, a situation where there is unrestricted, completely unregulated free expression globally. One of the things that I have studied a bit more in the past few years is this topic in my Conspiracies and Culture Wars Media Literacy Inquiry Project, which started in 2019. And I did not know a lot about social media platforms like 4chan and 8chan. During the pandemic, I became aware with some of my 6th grade students of the prevalence of memes and the ways that meme culture was actually even influencing us at school. And I need to get this book written. There's a whole lot of cultural literacy, media literacy, and just information awareness. And oh my gosh, those particular platforms, 4chan was shut down, and there's been an evolution of those things. I mean, that's where the QAnon conspiracy really was fueled, but a very, not only vitriolic, but nasty and offensive stream of content that was published there. What's happening today with Brazil, as they say in this latest Hard Fork episode, is sort of like the social conservative or the political conservative in the United States nightmare of censored speech. Because rather than, censoring individual voices and channels, like Brazil has now shut down the entire platform of Twitter. And there's a lot of Twitter users. I think they were saying like 20 million Twitter users in Brazil. So my wisdom and my thought today is that it's really important for us to talk about freedom of speech and to talk about, what our government regulations prohibit and don't prohibit. I really think that we need to understand and embrace the value of reasonable regulation. It seems like since the days of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, and that was in the mid to late 80s, that regulation and just government in general has a really bad name for a lot of people. A lot of people, have embraced this idea that government is the problem, regulation is the problem. And one of the best books I read in the past, I guess, year and a half, 2 years, I listened to on Audible, and it's by Stephen P. Johnson, and it's called Extra Life. And I need to do a review of that, and I'm gonna make a new page on my blog of like influential books, because I'm an old guy now. I turned 54 last month, and there's a lot of books that have really influenced me a lot, but some of them in the last 2 to 3 years. And Johnson's book Extra Life is an incredible story of how science, the double-blind study method that is advanced, not only modern medicine provided us with the vaccines that we had during COVID, but has led to dramatic improvements in longevity. I mean, it's called Extra Life because it's about the extension of life. But so much of that had to do with science and the embrace of science and the importance of regulation, right? At one time, the U.S. government, and it was through the FDA or whatever agencies were originally like certifying medications, they didn't even have to, the law didn't require them to say, does this medication work? They only had to say, does it have the ingredients you say it has? And there were all kinds of, shysters and fraudsters that, and this has happened forever, but they were peddling things that did not work and weren't effective, and in some cases had bad effects. And what was it? There was a medication that women took during the 1970s that led to all kinds of birth defects and I think stillborn infants, and I should have remember what that was. But here's the point. There is a great value in reasonable regulation of human behavior, and that can include speech. And so while I don't think that the path that Brazil is pursuing right now, where apparently like a single judge has decided for the whole nation that you're not going to have access to this entire platform, would be the way we want to go as the United States, or that countries should want to go. Because one of the important things about regulation and government restrictions on human freedom is that it's best crowdsourced with a group. When you have an individual who's able to say, no, I want to make this the law, and they're not accountable to other groups, there's not checks and balances, there's a lot of potential for abuse. But it's just very interesting to track all this. And as a teacher, as an educator, boy, it's hard, because there are so many things that are politically polarizing and difficult to talk about. I'm not teaching civics. I'm not even talking to my students about these issues. I teach middle school, but I'm certainly thinking about them myself, and I'm recognizing how important it is for us to talk about these things, because, and this will be my last thought because I'm going long here. Sometimes free speech absolutism, especially, has been used by individuals, and this can, I think, particularly involve folks who are on the extreme right, as a defense for very oppressive and offensive opinions, which can even be just terrible for human rights, right? It's very interesting to compare laws in today, Germany, with the United States. There's strong restrictions against, even the display or the possession of the Nazi swastika. I think a far-right group just gained power, I think in one of the provinces this last week or so in Germany, and it was the first time a group that's this extreme, and it's a Nazi group, has gained power. We are an open society in the United States. I value the freedom that we have. I value the freedom that I have as a citizen to be able to express these ideas and be able to share them. But I also recognize the important role that government plays, and I think that culturally, and I don't know how this will exactly manifest itself in this project, which I started and haven't done a lot with, called Heal Our Culture. You can find it at healourculture.org. I think part of healing our culture and part of helping create a better society, a good society together, involves recognizing the dangers that we have when we have a complete free-for-all with respect to, for instance, free speech. But there's a lot of things, right? If we just leave people to their own devices, there's a lot of greed that operates, there's a lot of selfishness, and channeled self-interest can lead to real positive outcomes, economically and capitalism and in other areas. But we need to have some limits and boundaries, and when we don't have those, and when we have a culture that really, in some circles, really despises the idea of regulation and government and advocates for something like free speech, absolutism, no restrictions, boy, that can absolutely be ugly and terrible and have negative consequences. So there's some thoughts. Maybe there's some wisdom there. I hope you have a great week and a great weekend. You can find more Wisdom with Wes episodes on YouTube if you just simply Google Wisdom with Wes, Google the hashtag Wisdom with Wes. Make it a great day.